Today, I'm making jalapeno and cheddar cheese sourdough bread. This bread is a 91% hydration, so it's a little difficult to work with, but the results are amazing. Look at that open crumb. Today, I'm using 3 types of flours, mostly white flour. I'm using 400 grams of white bread flour, and I'm adding 50 grams of whole wheat and 50 grams of rye. I'm also adding 445 grams of water, 91% hydration. Now I'm going to mix the dough until all the flour combines together. I'm going to mix this well and let it sit and do its thing. I'll come back to it in around 45 minutes. I feed my starter right before I go to bed. That way when I wake up in the morning, it's ready to go. Now I'm going to add the salt and I'm going to add my starter. I'm using 100 grams of 100% hydration starter. Make sure you calculate your hydration, adding your starter into the equation. In the meantime, I'm going to roast these jalapeños. Just a little bit of olive oil, salt and pepper in the oven at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes until they look like this. Now I'm going to give them a rough chop so they spread out through the bread nice and evenly and there's no big pieces. Today I'm using a seriously sharp cheddar Vermont style. This is one of my favorite cheeses. I think it's aged like 16 months. It's super good. Now I'm going to add the roasted jalapeños and the seriously sharp white cheddar cheese. Then I'm going to perform my first stretch and folds. I'm going to make sure that I mix these ingredients in very well. Now I'm going to cover it and set it aside for around 35 to 45 minutes. I'm going to start by doing some stretch and folds. After that, I want to build a little bit extra gluten and I want to make sure that the jalapeno and cheddar cheese is mixed in really well. So I'm going to then transition into some slap and folds. This is a technique that I like to use to build gluten very quickly. What you do is you hold it towards the top of the dough. You let the bottom part fall and kind of push it down onto the counter, and then you just fold it over and then keep doing that on repeat. That's how you do slap and folds. Now I'm going to cover the dough and let it sit for another 45 minutes. Then we're going to come back to it and perform our final stretch and folds. At this point, we're going to be very gentle with the dough because it's definitely built up some gas. When using whole wheat and rye flour, your bulk fermentation is going to be faster. These flours speed up fermentation, but also keep an eye on your dough temperature. Now I'm going to flour my banneton. You can use regular flour. I'm using whole wheat flour because that's all I had left at this point. So now I'm going to turn out the dough and we're going to start to pre-shape. The dough is very wet and sticky. I recommend wetting your hands. The dough will not stick to wet hands. Right here, I'm not wetting my hands and you can see that the dough is very sticky. So now I'm going to go back to the sink, wet my hands, and now look how the dough just magically doesn't stick. This technique that I'm using here is one of my favorite ways to build tension. It's called bench rounding. Now I'm going to lightly flour the dough. You don't want to flour it too much because when you do your stitching, like I'm going to do in like a second from now, it will be much harder for it to stick together. So just a light dusting. So now we're going to do some stitching, which is just crisscrossing the dough and you're creating more tension. The more tension, the better. Now we're going to roll it up like a burrito and pull it back and do more bench rounding, just so we get a little bit extra more surface tension, and then seal the sides. This is our final shaping before it goes into the banneton. Now I'm going to lightly dust the top of the dough with some flour. Then I'm gonna put it in the refrigerator overnight, but you can go up to 2 days. Cold fermentation builds more flavor in the dough, so I at least like to go 12 to 18 hours in the refrigerator. Pre-shaping and shaping is very important. As you can see, after I turn this dough out on the parchment paper, the shape is very beautiful and cohesive. This is gonna play a big role on how your bread looks after you bake it. Now we're just gonna score it confidently, quick and fast, and get it in the oven. I have a water bath in the bottom that I leave in my oven the whole time it bakes. I find that it keeps my oven staying on and it bakes the bread at a nice high temperature. I'm also going to bake this bread for 50 minutes. Usually I bake the bread for 40 minutes, but because it has mix-ins, it's going to take 10 minutes longer. As you can see, with even leaving the water in for the whole 50 minutes, I got a very beautiful golden brown crust. This is how I like my bread, and I feel like all bread should look like this, not that really blonde, yellow looking bread. When it's dark, it means there's more flavor. As you can see, the bottom of the bread is cooked very nicely. I usually keep my cast iron pan in the whole time I'm preheating the oven. I preheat the oven for at least 2 hours. I was really anxious and excited to see how this bread turned out. It felt like it was really good, light and airy. And as you can see, when I open it, wow, look at that crumb. It's so open and beautiful. This bread was so moist from the cheese, a little bit of spiciness from the roasted jalapenos. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.